Hi there, and welcome to Railway Rover. I'm Seb from To The Trains, and today I'm joined by Sean, otherwise known as WMTrainspotting, who's approaching 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. He's also the de facto branch lines expert, with over 20 videos covering a variety of these routes across the UK. So it's good to have you here, Sean. How are you doing today?
I'm exquisite. How are you?
That's very good. I'm doing well.
Excellent.
Let's begin. I think we'll start with a fun, obviously that's subjective, but a fun question. Do you have a particular favourite branch line or just route in general out of all of those that you've travelled, maybe for the rolling stock or the scenery, the location, etc.?
I get asked this question a surprising number of times, and every time I have to think back to every single route I've travelled on, which is one hell of a list. But I think rolling stock wise, my favourite would have to be the Belfast to Dublin route in Ireland, because the enterprise stock is fantastic. Scenery wise, it's more difficult because I haven't done any of the sort of stuff that you would consider, certainly in the UK, to be beautiful or whatnot, like Settle to Carlisle.
Right, yeah.
But scenery wise, I'm going to have to pop back over to Ireland, and I'm going to say the section between Castle Rock and Ballerina, and then onwards to Derry, Londonderry. Particularly the section that goes along Downhill Beach is beautiful.
Hopefully on the YouTube version, I'll find some royalty-free things so you know what that looks like.
Oh, I have plenty of footage from there, so
if you could just send me one clip, then that'd be great.
Yeah.
If you're not watching on YouTube, then
this makes absolutely no sense.
I think basically the conclusion from this first question is that I think Ireland is just
superior in every single way.
Superior to the UK.
Yes, yeah.
With that out of the way, I don't think we really need to cover the textbook definition of a branch line. Hopefully that's fairly straightforward.
I mean, ultimately, a branch line is just what the DFT classify it as. There's nothing sort of defining it. It just depends on what Grant Shapps think, or whoever it is now, goes, oh yes, I'm going to make it this.
Yeah.
It's how every single line possible gets its classification. Really.
Right. Would you say, like, classification aside, what really, as a passenger, as a commuter, or travelling for leisure, or what have you, what separates the branch lines from these commuter and intercity routes? And would you say that a branch line is equivalent to, or what others might call regional routes? Is there a distinguishable difference there as well?
I don't think there's a very distinguishable difference. It's all down to personal interpretation at the end of the day. A branch line, by definition, is where it spurs off the main line. But what is a main line is up for debate. So, for example, you could claim that, I think the most prominent example I've come across anyway, that the Hope Valley line in Sheffield, because it comes off the main line out of Manchester, is a branch line. But then you could also go, well, actually, that's a very significant route. Is it a branch line? I don't know what I ended up finding out about that. I'm sure I researched it and found a definitive answer, but I can't remember for the life of me. So I think a significant number of regional routes would be classified as branch lines, but you've also got things like I would personally say things like London to Cambridge, sort of border between commuter and regional routes, which is why it's very difficult to sort of provide a hard definition for branch lines, regional routes, and what's the difference.
So another sort of example of, like, where you say there's this sort of mishmash between what is a branch line, and you gave an example for one that I've sort of got another idea, going back to the Great Eastern Main Line, because I'm 100% not biased, but you've got how at Manningtree the line branches off to Harwich, and you could consider that to be on its own a pretty solid branch line. But then you've also got certain services from Liverpool Street, London Liverpool Street, that go all the way down to Harwich. And at that point, is it a branch line? I don't know.
It is, yes. By definition, it's called the Mayflower line, isn't it? It's
right,
definitely a branch line. It's classified by the DFT as one, so that I can safely provide a definition on.
There we go. We've just got the DFT dictionary here. There you go. I did say you were the de facto branch line expert as well. I think when I think about a branch line, instead of like using branch line terminology, I think we should start thinking about it, or just a smaller communities, more focused lines they don't mean anything to people. Generally, they don't mean anything to people on the other side of the country, but then there are these stations in those communities that are valued and important to the communities they serve.
Yeah.
With that said, how viable do you think these like sorts of smaller lines are, considering they aren't designed around economic hotspots? They're just smaller offshoot lines that only really mean something to the people that need to use them.
I think if there were ever to be another beaching style report, there'd be about half the branch lines we have today left at the end of it, because a lot of them have very low passenger numbers, which means that they would be considered not worth running the trains for, because they cost a lot more money to run than they would take in fares. But overall, I think as long as they're not doing it for just the money, which you shouldn't really be doing, particularly if they're now funding it out of the government for a public transportation service, which should be available to as many people as possible, it should be kept, because even if you've got 10 people a year using it, those 10 people a year won't be able to use it if it's not there. And if they're in some form of isolated community, take 𝗥𝗲𝗺𝗃, for example, much as that's not a very good example in this thing because it's very, very busy, you haven't got another way to get anywhere. And if you don't drive, that means you're a little bit stuck.
Absolutely. And I think, like you say, it's sort of like the human aspect of it has to come before how much money you're making from it.
Yeah.
And it's great. Your answer there is great because it's just knocked off two other points I was going to talk about. So that's a very substantial answer, actually. And I'm going to have to scroll down a little bit.
There we go.
How do you think, like, on these smaller lines, how do you think the rolling stock in particular compares? Like, any examples, or do you think some of them need upgrading, like, desperately, or do you think it's worth that upgrade, perhaps?
Well, I am generally going to have to do the age-old thing of the south rolling stock-wise, even on branch lines, is pretty fine. And then when you get up to the north, you've got single-car 153s, although that's more prominent in Wales now. You've got 150s and stuff like that, which could do with a replacement. They could just do with getting rid of them and putting in more 195s, in my opinion, much as people will murder me for that. Because, 150s really aren't that fit for 2021, in my opinion, anyway, much as they've had a refurbishment and whatnot.
Yeah, and I'm liking... there's a lot of pushes more for accessible trains, and the Class 777, that's a mouthful, on Merseyrail, I believe. That is, from what I've heard, a particularly accessible train.
Yeah, they've got level boarding, they've got a very nice sort of wheelchair area with all... there's been a lot of attention to detail certainly put in, because they've got all the facilities that you'll find in normal seats, if you will, throughout the wheelchair areas too, which is great. The fact that you're in a wheelchair doesn't mean you won't want to charge your phone or put your coffee down or whatever. So the fact that they've done the little things like that will mean a lot to a lot of people who use the trains. And then they have got the level boarding and stuff as well, as a lot of Stadler's new stock has, I think.
Yes, promotion Class 755 stuff. 745?
Indeed.
Stadler's just been really, I think they've been leading the way in that sort of area. And
oh, without doubt, yeah.
We keep, or at least I keep coming back to it, but it's a lot more human focused, like the actual people focus, as opposed to getting as many people from A to B. And I think that's something I do really appreciate about these regional branch lines, smaller lines, whatever you want to call them. When they've got this nice new upgraded but accessible rolling stock, you get the idea of how it serves like these different communities rather than masses of commuters on a day-to-day basis.
And what Merseyrail have done is incorporated both of that, which is why the 777s are so good, because they've got They haven't got a seat-wise capacity upgrade on the 507s and 508s. They're exactly the same that wise, but they've got much wider carriages because they've maximised it as much as they possibly can without it breaking the tunnels. So there's plenty of capacity for your commuters to spread out in, and then there's also these level boarding, the special wheelchair areas with all the facilities and whatnot, which is it's pretty much a perfect train
Yeah.
before the super 𝗟𝗶𝗃𝗀 style people come out and start criticizing the seats.
Yeah, I suppose, and I think there's a lot of like criticism from a rail enthusiast point of view, and I'm guilty of it as well. How the IETs just don't live up to the HSTs, how the 745s don't live up to the Class 90 Mark III sets, DVT. But I feel like that comes from a very heavily biased, like, rail enthusiast point of view.
Yeah, no, the thing about it is if you're a rail enthusiast, good for you. And if you want to sit on a HST, that's brilliant. But you're a very small portion of who uses the railway.
Absolutely.
And when we get to 2021, HSTs are not fit for purpose. We can't be having slam doors on the railways these days. And sure, if we upgraded everything to be ScotRail HST spec, that might be all right. But ultimately, the 800s are okay. They're not great. They're not bad. They're okay. They get the job done. Some are better than others. The GWR ones I'm not a fan of, mainly down to them using flat cloth instead of maquette, which just sort of makes the seats even harder than they need to be. And yes, I know the seats are hard. That's not a problem for me personally. But yes, I know some people will moan on relentlessly about that. But the thing about it is we can't just keep old trains in service because enthusiasts want them, because that would be pointless. And
absolutely. And yeah, it's just, I don't know how many, if you're watching this on YouTube or any other sort of streaming platform that has comments, then I want to hear what you think about that, about the balance between old and new, and how you feel about these newer sort of trains, not only just on these branch lines, smaller lines, but on the newer, you know, more mainstream, the main lines. That's what you'd call them, I suppose. Another interesting thing I've seen, like now and then, on these smaller lines that our tickets are relatively cheaper for, there's smaller differences between stations, is people getting season tickets, like between two of these stations, and getting the benefits of having a season ticket while not paying as much as you would for, let's say, London to Birmingham.
That's a 𝗟𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗃 to 𝗟𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗃 moment.
Yes, I think that was the example I've seen. I can't remember where I got it from, but that one really just stuck out.
I think it might be a certain transport YouTuber who drags their content out for money and also has a name which starts with a G and ends in an F.
When I'm thinking of these smaller lines, the stations, they're a lot more smaller. There's less facilities, and I think on some lines there's a bit of catch up to do. Particularly, you've got these nice trains. The trains are finally getting some attention in terms of improvements, but the stations, I think there's some work to be done. There's not many facilities, you know, especially if you need like assistance. There's not going to be a ticket office in the majority of these places. You've got to book online in most cases with the TOC so they can arrange something for you. It can be a bit more difficult travelling on these lines, I would assume.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why fare evasion is a lot higher on branch lines, I've found anyway, than sort of if you're getting on your London to Birmingham Pendolino.
Right, yeah.
Because no one checks it, particularly sort of the ones which are DOO, stations are unstaffed, trains are DOO, you can hop on and you won't come to anything, really.
So now, moving on to the future, and you briefly covered this a little bit before, but the future of branch lines, these smaller lines, regional routes, whatever you want to call them. But how do you think, in general, I guess it's quite hard to tell right now, but what do you think the plans are for the future, and especially in terms of the re-nationalisation of the railways? How do you think that will impact these lines?
Well, we're talking about the government, so probably nothing's been talked about at all in relation to it yet. But
Absolutely.
I would not be surprised if things are cut to cut costs at all. And likewise, I think much as GBR is a nice idea, I won't hold my breath on it actually improving anything. I think it's something that's probably been come up with to make it seem like, whoa, everything's going to magically change, but in reality, it's going to do very little and potentially just make things a hell of a lot more confusing. Because at the moment, if you're going to St Pancras, you're going to get on your EMR train to go to the East Midlands, you're going to get on your Southeastern
Yeah.
train to go to the coast, you're going to get on your Eurostar train to go to Paris and whatnot. Whereas if it's all GBR branded, oh look, I'm on a 395 to Derby. Oh wait, I think there's quite a lot of potential for some confusion, but
Yeah.
we'll wait and see. Can't say anything that much yet because I just haven't seen how it's panned out.
I think, yeah, I definitely share that opinion. I'm pretty sure when I found out about it, I was sitting at a train station and had like a 50-minute connection. And so I just downloaded the entire PDF and scrolling through it. And it just got the impression of, I don't want to say this is a good solution. I'd much rather just wait and see how this transpires. And I'm not saying that it's going to be a faultless transition, because it definitely won't be.
Yeah, it's just a case of waiting and seeing how it pans out, I guess. Time will tell.
Yeah, definitely. Though one upside right now, well, I don't know how long it will last. There are some funds to revitalize or just bring back into service some of these branch lines or the smaller lines that have been cut in the beaching cuts. Is there any that you know of or come to mind? Perhaps they've already got this funding, or maybe they don't. Is there any that you would like to see reintroduced in the rail network?
I think, is it Oxford to Bletchley? I know for something which I'm about to answer as one which I want to see. I don't know very much about it, but the sort of east to west rail project, I think it's called, is certainly an exciting one, and that will be great for connectivity. And I look forward to seeing that being brought in. But that will take time, I imagine.
Yes, and it's great you said that, but it also means that I don't have anything to say following that, because that's exactly what I was thinking.
Great minds think alike.
That connection, I think, yeah, it's just having that connection without having to go through London, for example.
Yeah, because you'd either have to go through London or Birmingham at the moment, and neither of the things you really want to do when you just want to get across the country.
Now, as we're going to wrap things up very shortly, I'd just like to gather your... It's slightly off topic, but I'd just like to gather your opinion on Lumo. What do you think?
Well, first of all, what a name. Luminosity and motion. I wonder how long it took a 3-year-old to come up with that. I won't hold my breath on it. I think 5 carriages for £15 fares between London and Edinburgh is going to be hell. I'm booked on the first service.
Okay.
So I will see how it pans out, but I don't have high expectations at all. I think it's going to be the Ryanair of train operators, to be perfectly honest with you.
That's great that you... It's also great that you said that, because the guest for the next episode, all sneak peek, when I spoke to them about Lumo, they made the same comparison with Ryanair.
Yeah.
And so for those who weren't aware, if you might have heard about East Coast trains or the bright blue IETs that have been running along the ECML. Well, that's just recently been announced. I think it was this week, or by the time you're listening to this, last week probably.
Yeah.
As Lumo. The name is a portmanteau of illumination and motion. Oh, such a incredible, revolutionary name. Not really.
Yeah, it's...
But it's aiming to offer a budget service between London and Edinburgh, I believe, and I'm interested in the idea. Whether it will be any good, I don't know. I might try and hop on a service sometime in the future. I haven't got any plans, so I'll see how it goes. Perhaps there'll be a Railway Rover episode on Lumo.
If they had capacity, it would be just lovely, but they don't.
Yeah, it will either be, oh, this is a great sort of thing that's going on, and maybe we'll see this on the West Coast Main Line, or maybe this is something they either need to go back to the drawing board on, or it's just an awful idea.
We shall see.
We shall indeed. So finally, Sean, Would you like to have some time to do a bit of self-promotion, I guess, for your socials? But if there's anything you want to share with the audience, and then I'll link it in the description of the YouTube upload.
You should definitely subscribe to me, because after my unpopular HST opinions, I'm probably going to lose about 200. You should follow me on Twitter, because I spam stupid stuff and train photos on there. What a combination.
That's incredible.
I'm at WMTrainspotting on Twitter, WMTrainspotting on YouTube, and yeah, that's it.
So yeah, thank you very much for your time, Sean. As mentioned, you can watch his content on YouTube, and you can catch him basically 24/7 on Twitter. Thanks again. I've been Seb. Hopefully you've enjoyed this first episode, and thank you for listening to 𝗟𝗶𝗻𝗄𝗏.